Chapter 1. The Banquet of Bad Luck. Luna Vale had survived 3 years inside Ironwood Palace by doing one thing exceptionally well: staying invisible. She was not the prettiest maid on the upper floor. She was not the fastest, nor the most graceful. What she had was a quiet sort of determination that kept her moving through marble corridors at dawn, polishing silver that would never belong to her, arranging flower arrangements for tables where she would never sit. But tonight, everything was going wrong. The Royal Harvest Banquet was the grandest event of the year. Lords and ladies from every allied realm had traveled to Ironwood Palace to feast, drink, and whisper politics into each other's ears. The throne hall glittered with 1,000 candles. Crystal glasses caught the firelight and scattered it across the ceiling like scattered stars. Every surface smelled of pine resin, roasted lamb, and the heavy floral perfume worn by noble women who had never once scrubbed a floor. Luna moved through the crowd with a silver tray balanced on her palm, weaving between guests with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to shrink herself to fit any space. She wore her standard uniform, a plain grey dress with a white apron, her dark brown hair pinned tight at the back of her neck. Her eyes, an unusual shade of deep amber, stayed low. Do not be noticed, she reminded herself. Serve and disappear. The problem started with the perfume. Luna had a strange, beautiful talent. In her small room in the servants' quarters, she blended her own scents from herbs, rainwater, and dried flowers she collected on her one free afternoon per week. Her latest creation was a little vial she called Wildwood Dawn, a blend of white jasmine, crushed cedar bark, and something she couldn't quite name, a bass note that smelled like the forest just after lightning struck. Warm, electric, and alive. She had tucked the vial into her apron pocket that morning, meaning to gift it to her friend Mary, another maid, who had been struggling with headaches. She had completely forgotten it was there. Until she tripped. The guest who stepped backward without looking was a lord from the eastern province, a round man who gestured wildly when he spoke. His elbow caught Luna's tray with the force of someone who had absolutely no awareness of the space around him. The tray tipped. Luna's hand flew sideways, hitting the edge of a pillar. She felt the vial in her pocket crack, then shatter, the warm oil soaking instantly through the thin fabric of her apron. She stumbled forward and collided directly into the back of the man standing at the head of the room. Chapter 2. The King Does Not Move. Caelum Dray did not stumble. He was built like something carved from mountain rock, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw set at an angle that suggested he had decided years ago never to look uncertain again. His ceremonial robe was deep charcoal grey, edged in silver thread that caught the candlelight. The Alpha King of Ironwood wore no crown tonight. He had never needed one. The room rearranged itself around him the way rivers rearrange around stone. When Luna crashed into his back, spilling the broken vial's contents across the shoulder of his robe, the entire hall went quiet in the way that only happens when something genuinely dangerous is about to occur. Luna's breath stopped. She looked up at the broad back she had just soaked in homemade perfume. She looked at the silver wolf crest stitched between his shoulder blades. She looked at the dead silence spreading through 300 people. Oh no, she thought. Oh, absolutely not. Caelum turned slowly. He moved the way all apex predators move, with zero urgency, because they have nothing to fear. His eyes, when they met hers, were the exact shade of a winter sky just before a storm. Pale grey, sharp, and dangerously calm. Luna opened her mouth. She had a speech prepared. It involved groveling, apologies, and offering to resign immediately before he could have her thrown into a dungeon. She never got to say it. Caelum's nostrils flared. Just once. Barely visible. But his entire body went still in a way that was different from his usual stillness, not controlled authority, but something rawer. Something that looked almost like shock breaking through ice. He leaned forward slightly. Not toward her face. Toward her neck. Toward the scent of wildwood dawn now soaking through his robe, drifting between them in warm invisible threads. Luna froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like something trying to escape. Chapter 3. 4 Words That Changed Everything. Every eye in the throne hall was watching. Lady Seraphine, standing 10 feet away in a silk gown the color of blood roses, had gone rigid with fury. River Ash, the king's beater, was already moving through the crowd with the quiet efficiency of a man about to manage a disaster. Caelum did not look at any of them. He looked only at Luna. At her amber eyes, wide with terror. At her hands, trembling slightly, still holding the empty broken tray. At the wild strand of dark hair that had escaped her pins and curled against her cheekbone. His voice, when it came, was so low that only she could hear it. "Where have you been?" Not, "How dare you?" Not, "Guards, remove her." Not, "Do you know who I am?" Just those 4 words. Quiet, rough, and strange. Like a man recognizing something he had stopped believing existed. Luna stared at him. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "I work in the East Wing, Your Majesty," she whispered. "3rd floor. Linens and candle maintenance." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like a crack in a wall that had been solid for a very long time. "Candle maintenance," he repeated, as if she had said something extraordinary. "I am so sorry about your robe," Luna managed, her voice shaking. "I will pay for the damage. I know that will take approximately 400 years on my salary, but I will." "River," Caelum said, not raising his voice. His beater appeared at his elbow instantly. "My king. Find out her name. Her full name. Her history." Caelum finally looked away from Luna, returning his gaze to the room, settling back into the cold authority that the court expected. "Tonight." River Ash looked at Luna. Then back at the king. His expression was deeply, profoundly alarmed. Luna stood in the middle of the glittering banquet hall, drenched in the scent of her own shattered perfume, watched by 300 noble guests, and felt the strangest, most terrifying certainty settle over her. Her invisible life had just ended. She simply had no idea yet whether what came next would destroy her, or save her. Chapter 4, The Morning After Silence. Luna did not sleep that night. She lay on her narrow cot in the East Wing servants' quarters, staring at the stone ceiling while Mary snored softly in the bed across the room. The small window above her showed a sky turning from black to deep blue, that restless hour before dawn when the world felt uncertain about whether it wanted to begin again. She replayed the moment over and over. Where have you been? What kind of question was that? She was a maid. She had been exactly where maids were supposed to be, in the background, in the corridors, in the invisible spaces between the lives of important people. She had never once stood in front of Caelum Dray before last night. She was certain of it, because standing before the Alpha King was not the sort of thing a person forgot. And yet he had looked at her as if she were something he had lost. By the time the morning bell rang, Luna had made a decision. She would be extra invisible today. Triple invisible. She would stay on the 3rd floor, tend her candles, fold her linens, and wait for this strange fever dream to pass. Surely the king had forgotten her already. Kings had important things to think about, wars and trade routes and the politics of noble marriages. Not clumsy maids who smelled like cedar and jasmine. She was halfway through replacing the corridor candles on the 3rd floor East Wing when she heard footsteps behind her. Not a maid's footsteps. Too heavy, too deliberate, too calm. She turned. River Ash stood in the corridor. He was leaner than Caelum, with sharp cheekbones and clever brown eyes behind a pair of wire-rimmed glasses that seemed completely at odds with the rest of his warrior's frame. He was holding a small notebook and looking at Luna the way a scientist looks at an unexpected result. "Luna Vale," he said. Not a question. "Yes," Luna said carefully. "Born in the village of Ashfen, 22 years ago. Mother, a seamstress. Father, unknown. Arrived at Ironwood Palace 3 years ago through the servant recruitment program." River flipped a page. "Commended twice for discretion. Never reprimanded. Described by head housekeeper Agnes as, and I quote, the quietest girl we have ever employed." Luna stared at him. "You investigated me overnight." "The king asked me to." River closed his notebook. His expression was not unkind, but it was deeply serious. "Luna, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you ever met King Caelum before last night?" "No," Luna said immediately. "Absolutely not. I would remember." "Have you ever been inside the royal wing?" The king's private library? The Moonstone Garden? No, no, and no, I tend candles on the 3rd floor east wing. My world is about 30 meters of corridor and a storage cupboard. River looked at her for a long moment. He seemed to be wrestling with something behind his careful eyes, information he was deciding whether or not to share. Then he exhaled slowly. Be careful today, he said quietly. And stay away from Lady Seraphine. He turned and walked back down the corridor before Luna could ask a single follow-up question. Chapter 5. The tests begin. Caelum found her at noon. Luna was in the palace library, not the royal one, the small servants' reference library on the 2nd floor, trying to identify a herb she had found growing wild in the courtyard, something with silver-edged leaves she wanted to try in a new blend. She had her nose buried in a botanical encyclopedia when the room's temperature seemed to shift, the air thickening slightly in the way it did before a storm rolled in off the mountains. She looked up. Caelum Dray stood in the doorway of the servants' library looking profoundly out of place, like a wolf that had wandered into a very small and very ordinary kitchen. Luna stood up so fast she knocked the encyclopedia off the table. Your Majesty. Sit down, he said. His voice was not unkind. It was simply very certain. He crossed the room and lowered himself into the chair across from hers, which creaked under his weight in a way that seemed personally offended. He looked at the scattered botanical pages on the table. What are you reading? Luna sat, slowly. I was trying to identify a plant. Silver-leafed, grows in northern shade. Smells like rain and iron together. Caelum was quiet for a moment. Then, moonvale moss. It only grows where the ley lines run close to the surface. There is a large colony of it in the Moonstone Garden. Luna blinked. You know about plants. I know about everything that grows on ironwood land, he said. It is my land. There was no arrogance in it. Just simple fact. Luna looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time without blind terror clouding her vision. Up close in the quiet library, without 300 spectators and all the theater of the banquet, he was still enormous and still intimidating. But there were things she hadn't noticed before. A thin scar that ran from his left temple to the edge of his jaw. The way his hands rested on the table, not folded neatly, but open, like a man trying very hard to appear unthreatening. The exhaustion living quietly underneath his cool grey eyes. Why are you here? Luna asked. And then immediately, why are you here, in the servants' library, Your Majesty? I don't mean that disrespectfully. I came to test you, Caelum said simply. Luna stiffened. Test me for what? Your character, he leaned forward slightly. I am going to ask you 3 questions. I want honest answers. Not palace answers, not what you think a king wants to hear. Honest ones. Luna's heart was beating very fast. And if I fail your test? No one has ever impressed me by failing honestly, Caelum said. First question. Last night, when you realized you had spilled perfume on the Alpha King, what was your first thought? Luna opened her mouth. Closed it. And then, because she was exhausted and frightened and had not slept and was apparently already past the point of saving herself through conventional wisdom, she told the truth. I thought, 400 years of salary will not cover this robe. Something happened in Caelum's face. The scar shifted. The corner of his mouth moved, barely, fractionally, but it moved. Second question, he said, his voice slightly less stone-like. If I dismissed you from the palace today, what would you do? Find work in the city, Luna said without hesitation. I blend perfumes. I could sell them. That simple? I don't require much, Luna said. I require enough. There is a difference. Caelum was quiet, watching her. Third question, he said finally, and his voice was lower now. Something quieter moving beneath it. When I spoke to you last night. When I asked you, where have you been? What did you feel? Luna's breath caught. She should have said confused, Your Majesty. She should have said frightened. Instead the truth slipped out before she could catch it. Like you already knew me, she whispered. And like that was the most terrifying and wonderful thing that had ever happened to me in the same exact second. The library was very quiet. Caelum reached across the table. He turned her left wrist gently upward, exposing the inside where her veins ran close to the surface. And there, barely visible, was the mark Luna had always assumed was an unusual birthmark, a small crescent shape, silver-toned against her skin, like a moon captured in miniature. Caelum's grey eyes went very still. "River," he said quietly. But River Ash was already standing in the doorway behind them, notebook open, expression carefully composed over what Luna now recognized as profound alarm. "Moonborn," River said softly. Luna looked between them. "What does that mean?" Neither man answered immediately. But Caelum had not let go of her wrist. And his grip, warm and impossibly steady, felt less like a king holding a subject, and more like a man holding onto something he had been afraid did not exist. Chapter 6, The Weight of a Bloodline. The word Moonborn echoed in Luna's chest for 3 days. River Ash explained it to her in the small servants' library the following morning, speaking quietly and quickly, the way people speak when they are sharing information that could rearrange the world if it fell into the wrong ears. The Moonborn were not a legend, he told her. They were a bloodline. Ancient, older than Ironwood itself, a royal line that had ruled the northern reaches before the Great Dispersal, the war 300 years ago that had scattered the wolf packs across the known territories and redrawn every border. The Moonborn line was believed extinct. Their gifts were rare and specific. An instinct for the living world, plants, weather, the pulse of growing things. A scent that was unique in all the realm. And the crescent mark, silver at birth, that revealed itself fully only when a Moonborn came into contact with their fated bond. Luna had sat very still through all of this. "So what you are telling me," she said carefully, when River finished, "is that I might be descended from an ancient royal bloodline." "Yes," River said. And the mark appeared, became visible, because of the king. River adjusted his glasses. "Yes. Because I spilled perfume on him." River opened his mouth. Closed it. "Technically, yes." Luna put her head down on the table. The problem was not the bloodline itself. Luna was a practical woman. She had grown up with nothing and built a small, careful life from whatever materials were available. The idea that her blood carried history she had never known was shocking, yes, but it was the kind of shock she could eventually fold up and put away somewhere and deal with later. The real problem was Lady Seraphine. Chapter 7, The Rival Without Mercy. Seraphine Vale was everything Luna was not. She was tall, effortlessly beautiful, with pale gold hair and the particular kind of confidence that came from having been told since birth that the world owed her its finest offerings. She came from one of the 3 most powerful noble families in the Ironwood Alliance. Her family's wealth had helped fund the palace's eastern fortifications. She had been preparing for the title of Alpha Queen for years, had studied governance, pack law, and diplomatic protocol. She wore perfumes that cost more than Luna earned in a month. And she was watching Luna with the focused attention of a hawk that had spotted something small moving in tall grass. The confrontation happened in the laundry corridor on the 3rd morning. Seraphine appeared around the corner with 2 of her attendants, blocking the narrow passage. Luna stopped, holding a bundle of folded linens, and met the other woman's gaze steadily. She had learned a long time ago that looking down was an invitation. "The little maid," Seraphine said pleasantly. The pleasantness was a weapon. "I have been wanting to speak with you." "My lady," Luna said. "Whatever the king's interest in you is," Seraphine continued, still smiling, "it will pass. It always does. He is easily distracted by unusual things, and you are certainly unusual. But Ironwood needs a queen with alliances, armies, and political value. Not a girl who smells like a forest floor and men's candles." She tilted her head. "Do yourself a kindness. Request a transfer to a remote post. The Northern Watchtower needs laundry staff. Disappear quietly, and we will all pretend this strange little episode never happened." Luna looked at her for a long moment. She thought about the small crescent mark on her wrist. She thought about Caelum's voice in the library, low and searching, asking her where she had been. She thought about 3 years of careful invisibility, of shrinking herself down to fit spaces that were never designed to hold her. "I appreciate the advice," Luna said. "I'll give it exactly as much consideration as it deserves." She walked around Seraphine and kept going. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she did not look back. Chapter 8: The Ceremony That Almost Was. The mating ceremony was announced 4 days later. It was the council's doing. Lord Chancellor Brennan, a rigid, silver-haired man who viewed tradition the way other people viewed oxygen, as something absolutely essential to survival, convened an emergency session and emerged with a decree. The Alpha King would formally select his bonded queen at the new moon ceremony, 6 days hence. Candidates would be presented from the 3 noble alliances. The ceremony would be witnessed by all allied pack representatives. It was, Luna understood immediately, a trap built around a tradition. The council could not forbid caelum from acknowledging a moonborn mate. The old laws were clear that fated bonds superseded political arrangement. But if caelum formally participated in the ceremony and selected a candidate before any bond was officially declared, the political machinery would become too large to stop. Luna heard all of this from Merry, who heard it from a footman, who heard it from River Ash, who had apparently been less discreet than usual because he was panicking. She spent that evening in her room with her vials and her herbs, her hands moving automatically through familiar motions while her mind worked at the problem from every angle. By midnight, she had reached a conclusion. She would leave. Not because Seraphine had frightened her. Not because the council's traditions were more powerful than she was. She would leave because staying felt like asking caelum to sacrifice the political stability of an entire realm for a maid he had known less than 2 weeks. Whatever ancient recognition lived between them, whatever the crescent mark meant and whatever bond the bloodlines whispered about, she would not be the reason ironwood fractured. She packed her small bag before dawn. Her perfume vials. Her botanical notebooks. A change of clothes. She left a small bottle of wildwood dawn on the windowsill. A last batch, carefully blended, with a note tucked under it that said only, "Thank you for seeing me." Chapter 9: The King Who Walked Past a Throne. The new moon ceremony was held in the Great Hall. 350 witnesses. Every allied lord, every pack representative, every member of the High Council. The room was heavy with candles and expectation. Seraphine stood at the front of the candidate line in a white gown that had probably been designed months ago, her expression composed and certain. Caelum entered from the north door. He moved through the hall with the same unhurried authority he always carried, but something was different tonight. River Ash, walking behind him, looked like a man watching a very large and very calm fire that he suspected was about to become something significantly larger. Lord Chancellor Brennan stepped forward, beginning the formal address. Alpha King Caelum Dray, before the assembled witnesses of the Ironwood Alliance, you are invited to. Caelum stopped walking. He lifted his head. And the entire room watched as the Alpha King's grey eyes went absolutely still, the way they had gone still in the library when he turned Luna's wrist over and found the crescent mark. Slowly, he turned his head toward the north corridor entrance, where Luna Vale had appeared. She had not meant to appear. She had meant to be 3 miles down the mountain road by now. But the scent of the ceremony candles had drifted on the wind, pine resin, formal smoke, the particular blend the palace used for bonding rites, and her feet had turned back before her mind had caught up with them. She stood in the corridor entrance in her plain grey maid's dress, her small bag over her shoulder, her amber eyes wide. 350 people turned to look at her. Caelum walked toward her. He did not hurry. But he did not hesitate either. He moved through the crowd the way he always moved, everything simply arranged itself out of his path. He walked past Lord Chancellor Brennan. He walked past the candidate line. He walked past Seraphine, who had gone so rigid she looked carved from marble. He stopped in front of Luna. Up close, she could see that he was furious, not at her, but at the morning, at the universe, at whatever combination of ancient law and political machinery had created a situation in which she had apparently decided the right solution was to quietly disappear before dawn. "You packed a bag," he said. "I was being practical," Luna whispered. "You left perfume on a windowsill. It was a gift." Luna, his voice dropped. Rough and certain and carrying something underneath it that had nothing to do with kings or bloodlines or ceremonies. "I have been Alpha of Ironwood for 9 years. I have sat through council sessions that lasted 14 hours. I have negotiated treaties with pacts that wanted to take my territory. I have done every difficult thing this crown required of me." He paused. "You are the only thing I have ever encountered that made me understand the word home was supposed to mean something." The great hall was completely silent. Luna's eyes were very bright. "I am a candle maid," she said quietly. "You are moonborn," he said. "And you are mine. And I am, quite clearly, yours. The scent has been on my robe for 9 days and I have not once considered washing it." A sound moved through the crowd. Not shock, exactly. More like the release of something that had been held very tightly. Luna looked at the crescent mark on her wrist, glowing faintly silver in the candlelight. She looked up at Caelum. "You know this is going to be incredibly complicated," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "The council will have opinions. They always do. Seraphine is going to be furious. She was already furious. She handles it well." Luna exhaled. And then, because the truth had always been the one thing that came naturally to her, she let it out simply and without ceremony. "I have been here," she said softly. Repeating his question back to him, the one he had asked in the banquet hall 9 days ago when the world had shifted. "I have been here the whole time. 3rd floor east wing. Candle maintenance." Caelum looked at her for a long moment. And then something happened in his face that 350 witnesses would later describe differently depending on who they asked. Some called it a smile, some called it relief, some called it the expression of a man who had finally found the one thing all his power and authority had never been able to locate. He reached out and took her hand, the one with the crescent mark, and held it carefully, the way you hold something you have no intention of ever putting down again. "Then I was looking in the wrong places," he said quietly. "I should have started with the candles." Chapter 10, What Comes After Claiming. The council raised objections, as promised. Lord Chancellor Brennan submitted a formal written complaint that was 4 pages long. Seraphine departed with her entourage the following morning and was reportedly quite icy about it, though she was also reportedly already fielding a courtship offer from the Eastern Province's second son, which softened things considerably. River Ash declared it the most chaotic fortnight of his professional life and then immediately began drafting the Moonborn bloodline verification protocols with the enthusiasm of a man who had been waiting for exactly this kind of extraordinary problem. Mary cried happy tears and demanded to be involved in every part of the planning. Luna moved out of the East Wing servants' quarters. She was given rooms in the residential wing, quiet, north-facing, with a wide windowsill that caught perfect afternoon light for drying herbs. She kept making perfume. Her workbench grew larger. Her collection of vials expanded across 3 shelves. Caelum, who appeared in the doorway of her workroom with an unsettling frequency for a man who supposedly ran an entire kingdom, developed the habit of sitting in the corner chair without speaking, reading documents, occupying space with that particular quality of stillness that Luna had once found terrifying and now found, she was honest enough to admit it, rather like having a very large and very warm anchor in the room. He never told her what to blend. He never had opinions about her experiments. When a new combination failed and smelled like burnt mushrooms, he noted this calmly and returned to his documents. When one evening she placed a small bottle in front of him and said simply, "This one," he uncapped it, held it to the light, and inhaled. And the expression that crossed his face was the same one she had seen in the banquet hall, not kingly, not authoritative, not the face of a man who ran a realm. Just a man recognizing something. "What do you call it?" he asked. Luna looked at the silver crescent on her wrist, at the man in the corner chair, at the windowsill lined with vials catching the last of the evening light. "Found," she said. Caelum set the bottle down carefully. "Yes," he said quietly. "That is exactly right. The end."